And we guys from Leviticus chapter 7, and we're going to be reading a whole chapter again. So please bear with me, it's quite a lot of reading. Just focusing just on one or two verses. Just a reminder that in chapter 1 we did the burnt offerings, chapter 2 grain offerings, chapter 3 peace offerings, chapter 4 sin offerings, chapter 5 guilt offerings, and then it's going into 6 and 7, just looking at the focus now on the priests and their duties, and specifically how they could now also eat of these offerings. They need to be provided for. They didn't have land, and they could then eat from those offerings, except for the burnt offering and the sin offering they couldn't eat. And so we're just going to look at various things. So if we're reading from verse 1, it says, "Now this is the law of the guilt offering. It is most holy." So we'll see ideas of the holiness of God. We see ideas with the shedding of blood. We see ideas coming across on how one has to be clean before God, and how one is to make right, specifically as we did those trespass or guilt offerings, where you've got to make right, and especially if you wrong someone else, you've got to pay them back the 20%, etc. And so verse 2, "In the place where they slay the burnt offering, they are to slay the guilt offering, and he shall sprinkle its blood around the altar. Then he shall offer from it all the fat, and the fat tail, and the fat that covers the entrails," the fat being the best parts, the most tastiest parts, and always the best animal, the animal without blemish, and the best parts of the animal get offered to the Lord. Verse 4, "And the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them, which is on the loins, and the lobe of the liver, he shall remove, and with the kidneys. The priest shall offer them up in the smoke on the altar as an offering by fire to the Lord. It is a guilt offering. Every male among the priests may eat of it. It shall be eaten in the holy place. It is most holy." And so the offering's holy. The priests need to be holy before they eat, and they need to eat it in a holy place. Verse 7, "The guilt offering is like the sin offering. There is one law for them. The priest who makes atonement with it shall have it. Also the priest who presents any man's burnt offering, the priest shall have for himself the skin of the burnt offering which he has presented." And so they could now take off, once they've made restitution for themselves, and they've made restitution for the people, and they've offered it to God, now they could receive back, and so the skin they could use for a number of things. Verse 9, "Likewise every grain offering that is baked in the oven, and everything prepared in a pan or on a griddle shall belong to the priest who presents it. Every grain offering mixed with oil or dry shall belong to all the sons of Aaron, to all alike." So the sons as well, family could eat, and so we have a lot of meat and a lot of grain that has been baked, type of bread offering, or bread that they could eat. Verse 11, "Now this is the law of the sacrifice of peace offering, which shall be presented to the Lord. If he offers it by the way of thanksgiving, then along with the sacrifice of thanksgiving he shall offer unleavened cakes mixed with oil, and unleavened wafers spread with oil, and cakes of well stirred fine flour with oil. With the sacrifice of his peace offering with thanksgiving he shall present his offering with cakes of leavened bread. Of this he shall present one of every offering as a contribution to the Lord. It shall belong to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering. Now as for the flesh of the sacrifice of his thanksgiving peace offering, it shall be eaten on the day of his offering. He shall not leave any of it over to the morning." And some of them they could leave it for 2 days, and some of them had to be eaten on the 3rd day, depending on which offering. But it was the sacrifice of his offering. But if the sacrifice of his offering is a votive or a freewill offering, it shall be eaten on the day that he offers his sacrifice, and on the next day what is left over it may be eaten. But what is left over from the flesh of the sacrifice on the 3rd day shall be burnt with fire. So if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering should be eaten on the third day, he who offers it will not be accepted, and it will not be reckoned to his benefit. It shall be an offensive thing, and the person who eats of it will bear his own iniquity. And so it won't be acceptable if they don't follow these rules and patterns that God has set out. Verse 19, also the flesh that touches anything unclean shall not be eaten. It shall be burnt with fire. As for other flesh, anyone who is clean may eat such flesh. And so if they had to touch a piece of pork or a dead person, dead animal, they became unclean, and so therefore they couldn't. And then they would actually make other flesh and other things unclean. The person who eats the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offering which belongs to the Lord, in his uncleanness, that person shall be cut off from his people. So severe consequences if you then, if you were offering an unclean state. Verse 21, when anyone touches anything unclean, whether human uncleanness or an unclean animal or any unclean detestable thing, and eats of the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offering, which belongs to the Lord, that person shall be cut off from his people. And that sin always represents sin, is always separating us from God. But we thank the Lord Jesus that he has made us right with God, and that we have been clothed with his righteousness, and that we have been made clean through his blood. Verse 22, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, you shall not eat any fat from an ox or a sheep or a goat, also the fat of an animal which dies, and the fat of an animal torn by beasts may be put to any other use, but you must certainly not eat it. For whoever eats of the fat of the animal which in offering by fire is offered to the Lord, even the person who eats shall be cut off from his people. You are not to eat any blood, either from a bird or an animal, or any of your dwelling. Any person who eats any blood, even that person shall be cut off from his people. And so the blood was precious. The life was in the blood, and it was through the blood that atonement was made. And so it would be a defiling thing to drink and eat that blood. Verse 28, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, he who offers a sacrifice of his peace offering to the Lord shall bring his offering to the Lord from the sacrifice of his peace offering. His own hands are to bring the offering by fire to the Lord. He shall bring the fat with the breast, that the breast may be presented as a wave offering before the Lord. The priest shall offer up the fat and the smoke on the altar, and the breast shall belong to Aaron and his sons. You shall give the right thigh to the priest as a contribution from the sacrifices of your peace offering. The one among the sons of Aaron who offers the blood of the peace offering and the fat, the right thigh, shall be his as his portion. For I've taken the breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the contribution from the sons of Israel, from the sacrifices of their peace offerings, and have given them to Aaron the priest and to his sons as their due forever from the sons of Israel. And so obviously we don't have offerings today in this sense, but the principle is that we need to be providing to those in full-time ministry, and they need to be taking a portion. Whether you want to say, I give 10% or more, a portion from your heart, a giving that's, the Bible talks about not letting your left hand see what your right hand seeing. So you're giving not out of obligation, you're giving to the Lord, but a portion of that needs to feed those in full-time ministry. Verse 35, this is that which is consecrated to Aaron, and that which is consecrated to his sons, from the offering by fire to the Lord, in that day when he presented them to serve as priests to the Lord. These the Lord had commanded to be given them from the sons of Israel on the day that he anointed them. It is their due forever throughout their generations. This is the law of the burnt offering, the grain offering, and the sin offering, and the guilt offering, and the ordination offering, and the sacrifice of peace offering, which the Lord commanded Moses at Mount Sinai in the day that he commanded the sons of Israel to present their offerings to the Lord in the wilderness at Sinai. And that's the end of chapter 7.